I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. The markets are crazy. We've made new all-time highs. You know, a couple of my guests, smart guys, Bo Pony and Gregory Mannarino, who happens to be a friend of mine who runs TraderChoice.net, both called market tops in 2015. And for, 13 months, at least for Gregory Mannarino, his top held. Please welcome Gregory Mannarino at TradersChoice.net. Gregory Mannarino, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks for having me back, Greg. I love your show. I really do.
Well, listen, you're top held for a long time, and I'm not trying to dog you out about being wrong, but you were right about they were going to do crazy things, they were going to do things that would drive things to unbelievable heights. And here we have a obvious top in the markets. That was 2015, I believe, May for the Dow for you. And here we have another all-time high. Greg, you sent me a chart. First of all, overall, what's going on with the markets in general? What is going on? Why are we seeing these new tops with terrible earnings and high unemployment and high food stamp usage? And I mean, the metrics surrounding the all-time high says the market should be tanking, but we don't have that. What's going on?
The reason why we broke, well, it's multifactorial, but I believe the main reason why we took out the last high is it's the same thing. It's on speculation that world central banks are going to continue to stimulate, suppress interest rates, go deeper into negative territory, and that's what I think, caused this recent run-up here. But what you're not going to hear on the mainstream is huge, and that is this run-up that we have seen, record high, is on no volume. What does that mean in the grand scheme of things? There's no conviction to this, and we've seen this before at every single market top. With no conviction behind a market, with nothing to drive it. In other words, if you were to turn on the mainstream and they're cheerleading and reading a script and trying to get people excited about this, they want people to believe that everyone is rushing into this market to buy it up, and that's not true. It's on almost no volume. So what that tells me is this will not last unless, Greg, once again, look, these world central banks are public enemy number one, without any doubt. They have and continue to distort asset prices, creating massive capital misallocation across the spectrum. I don't care what you want to look at, any asset. There's no price discovery mechanism behind it at all. We also understand that world central banks continue to get even more desperate, to talk about bail-ins, for example, talking about further stimulus, talking about all kinds of things to try to keep this propped up. But it's only going to go so far. Greg, I can promise you this. They're also using dark pools to buy stocks themselves to keep this market propped up. Now, you had mentioned earnings before. What are we seeing? It's incredible. We're seeing a lot of companies with a top line beat. In other words, they're beating their earnings per share, but their revenue is coming in light. Why is that happening? This is financial engineering, which I cover all the time. This is companies that are spinning off or selling assets and buying back shares of their own stock. I'll tell you something else that put a floor under this market, this backdoor bailout of the banks by the Federal Reserve, which is allowing, as you know, is now allowing, the Federal Reserve has given a green light to the Wall Street banks to buy back tens of billions of shares of their own stock. It's incredible. It's another bailout that went right under the radar. No one's talking about it, not even a whisper on the mainstream. So a lot of things are putting a floor in this market, speculation. I mean, we can go on and on as to what is causing this market to rise here. But I believe firmly at this point, I would have to say, and I went over this recently and on my own video blog, that there is probably a 90% or better chance that we've seen yet another top with regard to the Dow. The S&P, I'm not convinced just yet. But again, we're going to see what happens. The Fed, this is Fed week. So I believe the Federal Reserve is going to walk a very fine line here. They are determined, Greg, to keep this market at or near all-time record highs because politics is playing into this. This is an election cycle. I think people get that right now. And this is nothing new and nothing special. I urge people to do their own research. Look back at every single election cycle in the U.S. history and the stock market, and you see how they perform. There's a direct correlation there. The White House colluding with the Federal Reserve is nothing new to keep this market propped up. And that's another reason why we can forget about any rate hike whatsoever, probably forever, Greg. And I've been talking about this a lot. It has everything to do with that yield curve, which is also a big tell.
We'll get that in just a second. I got a double thing here. I'm holding up a chart here. It's the first chart you sent me. You made up a special chart because I said, hey, Greg, well, take a look at the stock market going back, and you got it 1971 to date. This is Dow Jones Industrial Average. And I'm going to go ahead and go full screen on me here on the chart. And you're looking at the chart, you can see going back, to 1971. I mean, you got bouncing around the bottom over here, and then it starts taking off in the 80s. But then you have this megaphone looking thing, and here we have it, the .com, the 2008, it goes all the way up here. Here's your top call. And boy, when you compress this thing like this, holy cow. I mean, wow, what a vaulting market that all of a sudden they made it go a little higher. And I think now you're calling for another, it looks like that this is topping out the same patterns again. Tell me about what this market looks like, the same topping patterns you saw here in in May of 15 are now up here at the very top of the, upper, right-hand part of the screen.
Exactly. Well, first of all...
Or left hand, I should say. I'm sorry.
That's okay. First of all, that longer-term chart you're looking at, I think it's very telling. We continue to follow that.
No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. It is the right-hand side of the screen. I'm sorry. I'm looking at this thing backwards. Okay. Yeah. It's the right-hand side of the screen. Very top. Left to right. Bottom going up to the right-hand side. Go ahead. And the chart. Yes.
Yeah, you got that megaphone pattern here, and we continue to follow it. Now, if you notice, because we have now gone higher following that same top of that megaphone, that makes the low, the potential low, even lower here. So now we have a potential fall in the Dow to 5,000. And I'm holding the chart up, and there's a bottom line here that basically you cut across both of these, boom, 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 and your chart work is saying, oh my gosh, because it's saying higher high means lower low, and now before you were saying 6,000, now you're saying the low could be 5,000. Is that right? Yeah. Well, again, exactly. The more they distort this, the more they create the bubbles, the greater the correction will have to be. Again, nothing is real in any asset class whatsoever. Nothing. And we know that because world central banks have taken over the largest part of the market, the debt market, and that has caused, again, a massive capital misallocation and malinvestments, unlike anything we've ever seen before. Now, just going back to that chart real quick, you look at those three tops.
That's right. I got it up right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other thing that we have that I've been literally screaming from rooftops about for weeks and weeks is we're seeing the same scenario unfold at the top of the .com bubble, at the top of the 2008 bubble, and where we are now. We're getting a market that is running up with the yield curve, which is flattening. Again, this is nothing special. We've seen it before, and both times it unfolded pretty dramatically, but this time will be worse because these distortions are even greater. But again, flattening yield curve, rising market, something has to give. Something has to give. And who knows? I think we're getting close. Now, just real quick, the reason why the Fed is not going to raise rates ever is because they are pinning down the short end of that yield curve. They don't want it to invert. By keeping the federal funds rate at zero, they're pinning down the short end of that yield curve. But what's happening is something I've been talking about, something you and I have spoken about on the phone, is the long end of that curve is coming down. I've been saying this is going to happen.
You're talking about the long end. You're saying that it is the 10-year, the 30-year.
10 to 30.
Those rates are coming down. I think
they're coming down to meet the short end of that curve. Now think about it. The Federal Reserve is well aware of what I'm talking about. about that yield curve flattening and possibly even inverting. An inverted yield curve invariably, I mean, look at history, leads to a meltdown of the stock market.
And
So
when you say inverted, you're talking about rates at below 0.38% for the Fed funds rate. You're talking about rates that are at zero or negative, actually, for the 10-year Treasury, like over in Germany. They got 13 trillion in negative rates in Europe and all over there. They have 13 trillion overall, and more banks are going to add to that. You're saying that this is that, so you'll have a federal funds rate that's positive, and the 10-year and the 30-year will be negative. That's what you're talking about inverting.
either negative or lower than the short end. So think about it. If the Fed is pinning down this short end of that curve, right? If they were to raise the federal funds rate, that will nudge this further. And that, I think, will start a cascade of events where we will get an inverted curve. So the Fed is well aware of this. They know this. So they're going to keep moving goalposts. They're going to make excuses, whatever they can come up with, to not raise the federal funds rate. But again, Greg, this can only go so far. These stock buyback programs, these stimulus programs, and everything connected to it, at one particular point, I think you know what I'm going to say. The medicine is going to turn to poison. It can only go so far. And
I call it the hemlock moment. The hemlock moment. The medicine will turn to poison.
It's going to be a hemlock moment. And I don't, look, to put an actual timeline in this has become impossible because world central banks have become very resourceful. Nobody, and I mean nobody, would ever have imagined that world central banks would have done what they've done for so long and actually flipped the system upside down, going negative interest rates deeper into negative territory. So again, they are so desperate now to keep the market propped up for multiple reasons. The main reason, and they realize this as much as I've been screaming from rooftops about it, is this is not a financial problem. This is a resource problem at its core. And when the debt bubble pops, Greg, I've gone over this a million times, there's going to be a resource issue globally, and that is going to lead to war, which we're marching towards right now. Does anybody have a reason why they can imagine that we have countries like China and Japan dumping U.S. debt right now? They're getting ready. They're getting ready for war. China's been gearing up for a long time here. And again, this is just a repeat scenario that we've seen over and over again. Unfortunately, it's the fall of empires. The United States of America has been changing rapidly, and we're seeing the same things that we've seen throughout history at the top of every empire: economic strife, terrorism, all of this stuff is all coming together. Corruption at the political level that is, frankly unbelievable. Again, this is nothing new, people. This has happened before at the top of every single empire.
And while you're there, just a quick one. You sent me another chart. It's kind of a close-up of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You know what it is, and it shows that topping pattern. Here's a close-up, and let me go ahead and go full screen on you here. And you talk about, here you have this pattern that you're seeing. Now we've had a couple of down days. As a matter of fact, you said last Wednesday or Thursday to me, I think the market's topping right here, and sure enough, it started selling off, and it's not doing well. And then we have this, what's called, you're saying a divergence. Can you explain this topping pattern, this little rollover at the top, and then this divergent down here? Can you explain this chart?
Absolutely. So you can see pretty clearly that the market is kind of rolling over there at the top.
Right.
And if you look at the very, very lowest part of that chart, you will see where the market is showing, according to that indicator, that it is overbought. Now that divergence there is a key. I think the last market top that I called in May of 15, the same divergence took place, and we're seeing it again now. Something has to give there as well. Just like the yield curve and the market going up, when you have a divergence, we have the market going up, and then you have that other indicator kind of pointing downward. Something has to give. And I think that downward momentum of that other indicator, that's a momentum oscillator actually, is clearly pointing lower. The real question is what's going to give here. I think, at least at this point here, it's going to be the market, because it's definitely in a topping pattern. Again, in my opinion here, these valuations cannot be justified, and we've been hearing that from the mainstream. We have a market that has gone up substantially on no volume. So, and we also had the fear greed index, Warren Buffett's favorite of them all. We happen to be in an extreme greed phase. When you have that extreme greed phase, this thing tends to sell off here. But again, Greg, let's keep in mind, and you and I have spoken about this, I don't know, 1,000 times, how these world central banks are going to do things to try to keep this market propped up until it doesn't. And I think they're going to try to do something. Who knows what's going to come out of their mouths this week? We're going to have the Fed minutes. Who knows how that's going to affect the market? I wouldn't be surprised.
You're saying you're 100% chance they will not raise interest rates. I don't think they will either. Going into an election like this, Hillary Clinton would be she's already a liar, and they're already booing her and booing, even booing Sanders for voting for her. I mean, this whole thing is crazy time. I mean, this is very disruptive, very, very unstable. To your point, the markets are not stable. They're trying to make them stable, but the political process very unstable.
Unstable. It's absolutely corrupt. And again, we've seen this before. Throughout history.
Oh yes, right, with email. Yeah, that proves that the Democrats, rigged the system for. I mean, they're like, the Russians hacked us. Well, I don't care who hacked you. You basically rigged the entire primary season where people spent money and worked to try to get their candidate elected, and it was totally rigged. And you had your person in from the beginning. And I think if this wouldn't have been rigged from the beginning, I wonder if Sanders wouldn't have won. I think he would have won. I really do. I think Sanders would have won.
I think he would have too. I really do. But I also think that maybe he was a willing pawn in the political process here. I would not say that's too far of a stretch here.
Just to act like some kind of pushback to Hillary, so it looks like a contest. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. I think that Sanders puppetized his own supporters here. I really do.
They're angry. These people are angry.
Yeah, because they realize what's going on here. I think they understand that this guy is a sellout. He's now supporting the same corrupt system that he was fighting against. I mean, come on, you got to be blind. I think this was a setup from the beginning here. Nothing ever happens in politics by accident, and this is what happened. He refused to go after her when she was before she was supposed to be indicted. If he would have kept on that, and with all this, he probably would. Right now, in fact, I'm sure, like you said, he would have been the nominee.
He would have been the nominee, even though it was. Can you imagine? He won 20 states, and it was totally from the beginning, everybody, totally rigged against anybody but Hillary. And I mean, I think he would have won if it wasn't rigged, and he could have won if he went after her. But I mean, his supporters are at the convention. I couldn't believe these are Democrats. Hell no, DNC. We won't vote for Hillary. I mean, they're chanting that at the convention. What?
Yeah, exactly. But I think if these people thought about it, they would realize that they have been made puppets here, and it's unfortunate because this is all just going to blow away too, like everything else. This is the state of affairs that we're in right now. Nothing is real. Not even the politics isn't real. These markets aren't real. We are existing in fantasy land, and all of this, every single aspect of it, is going to correct at one point here. Whether it's a distortion in politics, whether it's distortions in this market, no matter what it is, at one point there's going to be a return to the norm or to the mean. And we are so far and away from that right now in every single thing you want to look at. And it's not just in the markets. It's everything connected to everything else. And we've seen it again. When power gets localized with a small group, they tend to, use that power against everyone else. And we're seeing it. Again, I think the title of our last video was maybe The Fall of Empires or something, but that's exactly what's playing out here. We are in the collapse. Or the correction to fair value. Everything we're seeing with strife around the world, strife here in the United States, people uprising, what's going on, it's all part of the mechanism that is playing out right now. It's just a matter of time when there's going to be a rapid fix, in a way, back to the norm. And it's going to be incredible, I think.
I wanted to get into what they were talking about over in Europe. Mario Draghi, talking about desperation. I mean, he's talking about easy money policies to infinity. That wasn't his exact words, but that's what he's talking about. Then also that there'll have to be public involvement in the banking in fixing the system or whatever. I mean, in public involvement, that just means, hey y'all, we're going to steal your money. Isn't that what that means over there in Europe? And doesn't that and what goes on in Europe doesn't stay in Europe? It comes over here. Could you give us your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I've been saying this for the longest time. See, people don't understand that they are going to be forced to pay for all of the mistakes and these distortions that have been fostered by runaway central banks and their respective government. Period. They're going to pay for it. I don't care if they feel disconnected from it or whatever it might be. They are not safe. I have no doubt that if the system, and it will, when it reaches that critical mass where, oh my goodness, the financial system is going to collapse, they're going to take everything from everyone that they can. That's the truth here. And I would say, there's no doubt.
So that's what
There's
Draghi.
no doubt.
That's what Draghi's telegraphing. That hey, we're going to be. This is on your backs, and just letting you know. So when it blows up, we can say we told you so. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, Greg. Look what just happened here. Look what just happened here in the United States again. We bailed out the banks again by the Federal Reserve allowing the Wall Street banks to take the excess reserves that they have built up since 2008 and use that cash to buy back tens of billions of their own stock.
Excellent point.
Backdoor bailout.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Gregory Mannarino, of course, you are at traderschoice.net. Gregory Mannarino, thanks for coming. Oh, one last thing, and I'm going to make sure I get this clearly. Now, you called it before, and I'm not like, nana, nana, poo, poo, stick your head in doo doo. But, you called it, your call lasted for 13 months. Big call. Are you ready to make another call that the market is topping out yet, at least the Dow?
I think we've topped out with the Dow. Yeah, unless some miracle happens, we've seen the high
in the Dow. So this is calling the top 2.0.
Calling the top 2.0. Let's see how it plays out.
Okay. Gregory Mannarino, traderschoice.net. Everything on the site is free. All your ebooks, all your work, all your stock picks, everything's free at traderschoice.net. Gregory Mannarino, thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.